When the Browns made the call to bench Shedeur Sanders in favor of Dillon Gabriel, Garrett's reaction was measured but unmistakable. Known for his professionalism, Garrett's composed but clearly frustrated presence during the announcement became its own kind of statement. There was no outburst, no direct challenge, just a shift in energy that teammates and fans alike picked up on. In a franchise riddled with indecision, Garrett's quiet demeanor spoke volumes about how the move was received behind closed doors. The video underscores how Garrett's leadership doesn't rely on volume. His nonverbal response became a rallying point for those questioning the team's direction, especially as Sanders continued to perform well in practice. While the Browns front office prioritized their own timeline, Garrett's subtle dissatisfaction added weight to the growing unrest. His actions served as a reminder that true leaders don't need to shout when something's off. They simply let the silence speak for them. Myles Garrett, the Browns' leader in every sense of the word, is furious, not in a dramatic, helmet-throwing, headline-chasing way. This isn't about outbursts or locker room theatrics. It's worse. It's that heavy, silent kind of fury that only shows up when players' trust in the people upstairs starts to unravel. And that unraveling started the moment the Browns quietly announced their decision to bench Shedeur Sanders in favor of Dillon Gabriel. No explanation. No justification. Just a decision that blindsided the locker room and left a trail of confused, disappointed reactions in its wake. Because make no mistake, this wasn't just about picking a quarterback. This was about picking a direction, a philosophy, a signal to the entire team about what matters in Cleveland. And the message they sent, it was the wrong one. Sanders had been setting the tone since day one. He wasn't leaning on hype or riding the wave of name recognition. He was earning it day in, day out, first to arrive, last to leave, locked in at practice, focused in meetings. The kind of professionalism that doesn't need to be advertised because teammates just feel it. But when it came time to choose who would lead the offense, the Browns didn't go with a guy earning respect through effort. They went with a safe PR choice, the one that stirred less conversation outside the building, Dillon Gabriel. And that's when everything cracked. Garrett's reaction wasn't loud, but it was immediate. You could see it on his face during the announcement, the barely hidden frustration, the complete lack of enthusiasm. His body language alone could have been a press release, because when a veteran like Garrett, who's seen years of dysfunction, coaching changes, and wasted potential, starts shutting down, that's not just disappointment. That's warning-level discontent. He's not just watching bad decisions being made. He's watching a culture corrode. Garrett's leadership has never relied on speeches or dramatics. It's in the way he plays, the way he shows up, the way he holds himself and others to a standard. So when that guy stops clapping for decisions, starts sending cryptic social posts, and shifts from leader mode to observer mode.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
You've got a real problem. And inside that locker room, it didn't go unnoticed. The vibe shifted. Suddenly, players weren't sure where they stood. Some stayed loyal to the coaching staff, trusting the system. Others, especially those close to Garrett and Sanders, grew quieter, more skeptical. The kind of tension you can't coach your way out of. Because the question wasn't just, why isn't Sanders starting? The real question was, why aren't we rewarding what's earned? And that's where Garrett's frustration lives, right in the middle of that disconnect. The Browns have always had a problem with internal direction. They'll talk about building something real, developing talent, building chemistry. But then when it counts, they make a choice that screams panic or politics, or worse, PR. And the decision to bench Sanders, despite his dominant preparation and practice showings, fit that pattern perfectly. Gabriel wasn't the issue. The decision-making process was. This wasn't about one bad read or a shaky preseason. Sanders had been consistent, composed, demonstrating exactly the kind of progression you want in a young quarterback. But instead of letting that momentum carry forward, the Browns sidelined it. They chose to ignore what was unfolding right in front of them. And Garrett saw all of it. He didn't need to go to the media. He didn't need to blast the coaching staff. He simply started acting different. Less visible support. Less energy. A few cryptic Instagram captions that raised eyebrows. A slow clap in a meeting that didn't exactly scream, "I agree with this." And in NFL culture, that's louder than yelling. The most striking part of all this, Sanders didn't lash out. He didn't go on social media or call out the staff. He just kept grinding, kept throwing, kept leading drills with the same energy and focus that got him noticed in the first place. That quiet confidence, it worked. Players noticed. Coaches noticed. Garrett definitely noticed. What started as quiet support slowly became public. Garrett's approval became clearer every time he offered a nod after a clean throw or stood next to Sanders during team drills. These weren't empty gestures. They were statements. And in a locker room starved for stability, those statements mattered. Meanwhile, Gabriel's time under center was fine. Not great, not catastrophic, but it lacked command. It lacked the intangible control that quarterbacks either have or they don't. The kind that makes huddles tighter and sidelines believe. Sanders had that. Gabriel didn't. And that's what made the decision so hard to justify. Even as Gabriel took reps, the team felt stuck in neutral. Players started questioning why they weren't leaning into the obvious answer, why they were still clinging to a choice that didn't reflect the reality on the field. The coaching staff didn't address it. The front office stayed silent. And the fans, they exploded. Social media lit up with calls for Sanders. Analysts started pointing out the clear disparity between what was happening in practice and who was starting on game days. It became impossible to ignore, and that's when things started shifting. Sanders didn't just maintain his effort, he elevated it. Week by week, he gained more reps, his execution improved. His command of the offense became too visible, too undeniable to keep ignoring. And slowly, the balance began tipping. Coaches started giving him more looks. Teammates started rallying around him. And Garrett, his demeanor started changing too. Not all at once, but you could feel it. A little more engagement, a little more energy, because Garrett had made his stand. He wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it for the culture. And finally, it was starting to work. This isn't just about who's under center anymore. It's about whether the Browns can finally stop stepping on their own progress. Can they trust the players who show up every day, lead by example, and perform when it counts? Can they listen to the leaders on the field instead of chasing optics off it? Because this is what Garrett's protest was really about. Not just Shedeur Sanders. Not just one quarterback switch. It was about holding the franchise to the standard that he plays with. A standard built on consistency, accountability, and belief in the process. He didn't scream it. He didn't demand anything. He just stood still and watched. And his silence? It was louder than anything the coaching staff had to say. The Browns are still at a crossroads. Sanders is rising. Garrett's faith is slowly being restored. But the damage from this decision won't disappear overnight. The locker room saw what happened when politics beat out performance. And they'll be watching to see if it happens again. Because if this franchise keeps ignoring its own leaders, it won't matter how much talent they stack up. The trust will break. And once it breaks, the culture crumbles. So the Browns have a choice. Keep stumbling toward dysfunction, or take the cue from the guys who are actually doing the work. Garrett's done his part. He's taken the high road, led with quiet conviction, and backed a young quarterback who earned it the right way. Now it's up to the front office to follow through, or risk losing the locker room for good. What do you think? Has Garrett's silence already shifted the direction of this franchise? Should Sanders be the starter moving forward? And is this the turning point the Browns desperately needed, or just another temporary correction before the next meltdown? Let us know in the comments. And if you're here for more deep dives into the drama no one else wants to talk about, hit subscribe. Because the Browns may not always get it right, but will always be here when it blows up. What's happening in Cleveland right now isn't just a quarterback controversy. It's a full-on identity crisis. And no matter how much the coaching staff wants to downplay it, no matter how carefully the front office tries to steer the narrative, the truth is already out in the open. This team is divided, and the fault line, it runs right between Shedeur Sanders and Gabriel, with Myles Garrett standing squarely in the middle, refusing to let bad decisions slide under the radar. The original decision to start Gabriel didn't just catch the locker room off guard. It sent a message that shook the foundation of the team's trust. Here was Sanders, a young quarterback who had shown nothing but consistency, poise, and work ethic, getting eyes for no reason that made sense to the guys in the building. To players like Garrett, who live and breathe accountability, it wasn't just disappointing. It was infuriating. Because Garrett knows what happens when standards are ignored. He's lived through it. He's seen this team try to shortcut its way to success before. He's seen moments where talent was wasted, where locker room voices were dismissed, where decisions were made not for football reasons, but for optics. And watching the same script play out with Sanders hit a nerve that's been building for years. You want to talk about leadership? Start with Garrett. He didn't lash out. He didn't hold court for reporters or throw his teammates under the bus. He just pulled back just enough to let everyone know something was wrong. The way he carried himself said it all. This isn't how winning teams operate. His frustration wasn't just about a benching. It was about the erosion of trust between the people on the field and the people making the decisions off it. And in a sport where trust is everything, that kind of fracture can turn a talented roster into a disaster overnight. And the worst part? It was all so avoidable. Sanders had done everything right. No headlines, no drama, just work, every single day. And yet somehow, that got sidelined in favor of a quieter, safer narrative. But the problem with safe decisions in the NFL? They rarely win games. And they never win locker rooms. The players saw the reality. Garrett definitely saw the reality. Gabriel, to his credit, tried to take on the role. But he wasn't the guy. Not in that moment. The connection wasn't there. The huddle didn't click. Drive stalled. The spark that every good offense needs? It was missing. And the more time went on, the more obvious it became that the Browns were holding back their own momentum, trying to force something that just wasn't working. Meanwhile, Sanders kept showing up, kept grinding, kept proving he belonged. And finally, the staff started giving him another look. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they simply couldn't deny what was in front of them. The shift was slow, but it was real. More reps, more responsibility. A little more weight in the playbook. And behind it all, Garrett stayed locked in, watching, steady, waiting for the people upstairs to finally catch up to what the locker room already knew. That's the thing about Garrett. He doesn't just react. He waits. He observes. And when the time comes to speak, even through a look or a gesture, everyone listens. Because when a guy like that signals the standard has been broken, you either fix it or lose the room. And right now, that room is finally starting to tilt back toward clarity. Sanders has earned the trust. Not with one great practice or a flashy preseason moment, but through sustained, quiet excellence. His teammates believe in him because they've seen him do the work. And Garrett's been a quiet architect of that shift. Never demanding, never begging. Just making it clear that this is a guy who gets it. It's still delicate. The damage from the original decision lingers. There's still tension around the coaching staff. Still whispers about why things played out the way they did. But the more Sanders plays, the more it feels like a course correction is actually happening. And Garrett? He's starting to lean back in. You can feel it. The intensity of practice. The sideline energy. That unmistakable sense of belief creeping back into his posture. Because for the first time in a while, it looks like Cleveland is listening to its leaders instead of chasing its fears. But let's not pretend this is over. Because the real issue wasn't just who started at quarterback. The real issue was Cleveland's tendency to value narrative over performance, politics over preparation. And that won't fix itself with one personnel change. This team still has a choice to make. They can use this as a turning point, an inflection moment where they finally commit to building something real, something sustainable, or they can let the same patterns repeat. They can ignore Garrett's leadership. They can waste Sanders' rise. And they can keep playing this dangerous game of undermining their own potential. Because no matter how good the roster looks on paper, if you're not aligned on values, if your veterans are fighting one battle while your front office plays another, you're never going to win anything that matters. And Garrett knows that. That's why his reaction mattered so much. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. He didn't have to say it out loud. He was telling everyone exactly how he felt every time he refused to celebrate a bad decision. Every time he posted a cryptic quote instead of a highlight. Every time he stood next to Sanders instead of nodding along with the coaches. It was leadership without a single word. And now, that silent protest might actually be steering the franchise in the right direction. Sanders is showing he's ready. Not because of who he is, but because of what he's done. Garrett's re-engaging. Not because someone asked him to, but because the team is finally starting to reflect the values he's been demanding all along. And if the Browns lean into this, if they stay the course and finally trust the leadership they've already got in the building, this could be the moment everything changes. Not overnight, not easily, but finally, because this team doesn't need more splashy signings or media-crafted redemption arcs. It needs trust. It needs alignment. And it needs to remember that the guys who show up, put in the work, and lead by example are the ones who should shape the future. Garrett's been that guy. Sanders is becoming that guy. And now, for the first time in too long, Cleveland has a chance to become that team. But only if they stop fighting themselves. If they choose clarity over confusion, leadership over noise, performance over politics. So here we are, a franchise at a crossroads. And the question isn't just who plays quarterback next week. It's who this team wants to be. Will they back the voices that have earned it? Or will they keep chasing decisions that only make sense on paper? We've seen what happens when they pick the wrong side. Now it's time to find out if they've learned anything at all. The truth is, the Browns don't get many more chances like this. This isn't just about salvaging a season. This is about salvaging culture. And that's not something you can build overnight, no matter how many press conferences you hold or how carefully you phrase your post-game sound bites. Culture gets built through decisions, especially the ones everyone's watching, especially the ones that threaten to tear the team apart. And this decision, it almost did. Benching Shedeur Sanders was more than a bad call. It was a failure of leadership, a failure to see what was unfolding in front of them, a failure to recognize not just who was performing best, but who was setting the tone, who was showing the maturity, the consistency, and the composure that you need in a quarterback. The front office didn't just make a mistake. They made the wrong guy pay for it. And Myles Garrett watched the whole thing happen in real time. Let's be real here. Garrett's not some moody diva airing out grievances just because he doesn't like how a depth chart shakes out. This is someone who has stuck with his franchise through years of chaos, through endless coaching turnover, talent misfires, PR disasters, and locker room resets. He's been the one constant, the guy who shows up, dominates, and leads without ever demanding credit. So when he starts pulling back, when he stops buying in, that's a 5-alarm fire. And the coaching staff knew it. They might not say it out loud, but you can feel it in the way things shifted, in the way Sanders' reps quietly started to increase, in the way players started standing closer to him in drills, the way Garrett's energy on the field started coming back, not because someone told him to, but because finally it felt like the ship was turning. This wasn't about a mutiny. This wasn't rebellion. It was realignment. The Browns, for all their history of dysfunction, still have a chance here. But only if they actually learn from this moment. Because this situation has exposed the exact kind of rot that kills talented teams. Inconsistency at the top, a refusal to admit mistakes, and the arrogance to believe that players won't notice. Spoiler, they always notice. Especially guys like Garrett, who've earned the right to call out the double standards, even if they do it without raising their voice. What's remarkable is how the fans saw it too. The noise wasn't just coming from inside the locker room. It was coming from every corner of social media. From breakdowns of Sanders' footwork at practice to fans demanding clarity on why a high-performing rookie wasn't being given a chance he'd clearly earned. The Browns had backed themselves into a corner, and Garrett's silence was the push that forced them to acknowledge it. This is a part of the story where it could all turn, where things could finally click. Sanders is gaining trust. Garrett is re-engaging, and the locker room is starting to feel like a team again. The question is, can they hold on to it? Because here's the thing about a fragile locker room. It doesn't take much to break it again. All it takes is one more ego-driven decision. One more move that puts narrative over performance. One more moment where the players realize they're not being heard. And if that happens, it won't be quiet next time. Garrett won't say it, but he's already given them their last warning. He gave it when he watched the benching announcement in silence. He gave it when he clapped slow and deadpan during team meetings. He gave it when he started subtly aligning himself with Sanders, not in defiance, but in support of what's right. And that's what makes the situation so fragile. Because once a veteran like that loses faith, once he starts to believe the leadership can't or won't evolve, that's when exits start being planned, not out of spite, but out of necessity. You can only carry dysfunction on your shoulders for so long. And Garrett has carried it longer than most. He deserves better. And he's not the only one. So does Sanders. So does every player who puts in the work, performs under pressure, and gets overlooked because someone higher up would rather play it safe. The Browns still have a roster that can compete. They still have time to stabilize the mess they created. But it's going to take real accountability. Not just shifting quarterbacks again, but acknowledging why they got it wrong in the first place, and what it cost them in the process. You want to win? Start by listening to your leaders. And not just the ones wearing headsets. Start by watching what Myles Garrett has been trying to tell you this whole time. Not through words, but through presence, through patience, and through refusal to co-sign dysfunction. That's leadership. That's culture. That's what the Browns need now more than ever. So what's your take? Is the front office finally listening? Will Sanders take over and lead this team like everyone inside the locker room knows he can? Or are we still waiting for the Browns to stop tripping over themselves? Sound off in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. And stick with us for more deep dives into the chaos behind the headlines. Because if the Browns are going to keep living in drama, we'll be right here breaking it down every step of the way.